Three, two, one. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest. He came to my attention through my producer in the UK, and he's written and posting a lot of very interesting information on his Twitter feed. He goes by the title Saturnalia Sundown. I'll reference him as Sundown, but in particular, we're going to talk about a fascinating case that I remember that involved a young man in the far western part of Brazil, really closer to I think Chile, that part of Brazil, that he wrote that he had this very strange room with very cryptographic insignias and statuaries, little statuarial figures. His name was Bruno Borges, and that story kind of came to the surface, and it kind of came out of my perspective. I wasn't really following it, but Sundown has followed it, so I'm going to ask him a few questions, and he's going to talk about this interesting case and maybe some of the other research that he's done on other kind of parapolitical subjects. So, Sundown, are you there?
I'm here.
Awesome.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you agreeing to the interview. I was going through your Twitter feed with great interest on all these other different subjects as well. But for people who aren't aware of you, can you talk a little bit about your background and how you became interested in these subjects, and then lead into the odd case of Bruno Borges?
I'd say this all sort of began when I was basically ostensibly a young child. I've been pretty deeply interested in esotericism, the occult, and stuff like that since I was 11, 12. I started using 4chan very early. I started browsing 4chan when I was 10 or 11 in fifth grade, sixth grade. And around the same time, I was listening to a lot of industrial music, like Throbbing Gristle, Current 93, I'm sure you know, or maybe have heard about how they're sort of all tied up with the Lima and
Yes.
chaos magic and stuff
Yes.
like that.
I know.
And I essentially just spun off from there. I got really into Philip K. Dick. I was enamored for several years with the concept of Gnostic Christianity. And I've become less so in recent years. And essentially, I've just tried to make a relatively thorough study of Western esotericism as it relates to conspiracy theory, basically. In more recent years, I think we live in a very political climate, so just like you're saying, parapolitics, the two sort of are inseparable from each other once you sort of know enough about occult philosophy and the motivations that might really be motivating things going on in the world.
Agreed. It leads you right to the occult, really, because you
It,
realize
it does, yeah.
that's why they're on the fringes, or that's why they're hidden. That's where they're occulted.
Great.
So, how did you get into this subject of Bruno Borges? I don't recollect the actual date that this story surfaced, but can you give a primer to the listener if they don't recall or have not heard of this, please?
So I think it would be beneficial to talk about Cicada 3301 first.
Perfect.
It sort of segues into the Borges case. So this all started on January 12th, 2012. So I was 16 at the time and a very heavy 4chan user, and I, of course, gravitated towards the paranormal board X, which is where people would discuss paranormal and conspiracy theory things. And are you familiar with the concept of an ARG?
I'm
It,
not. Could you explain that?
so an ARG stands for an alternate reality game. These were pretty popular. They're sort of less popular in recent years. They were sort of a relic of, say, like late 2000s internet culture, wherein basically a set of clues would be presented in a public place and on the internet. And that would lead you down solving the clues to find sort of like a progressive storyline. You would sort of sketch out an idea of a plot, and a lot of them were very sort of paranormal themed, or very creepy in implication, in order to, I guess, make the players or the solvers feel like they were progressing down this sort of very real conspiracy. And I'd participated in a couple of those, one before Cicada and one after. One which was just ended up being nothing. It was basically an advertisement for this guy's noise band. And then one after, which was the Erratus ARG, which also ended up being basically nothing. It was an advertisement for another band. Um, and so these are often employed as advertisements for products. Halo 2, the video game, was accompanied by one, a very easy one at its launch, which I did not participate in. But so on January 12th, 2012, there was an image posted on X, on 4chan. And it was just a black image, and it said, "Hello, we are looking for highly intelligent individuals. To find them, we have devised a test. There is a message hidden in this image. It'll lead you to the next clue," basically, right? So this would eventually lead into a 3-4 year long saga that is, in reality, still ongoing, although at a much slower pace.
Did this one have a title?
This was the beginning of Cicada, although
Okay,
people
gotcha.
didn't quite know it yet.
I see.
So basically, the image was just this black image, and people assumed it was basically like any other ARG, that there would be a fun plot you could go down, there'd be a storyline you could follow, that it would essentially be like a fun time to try and solve this, right? But Cicada 3301 differs from basically any other ARG that's ever existed on the internet. Initially, because it's so much harder. The clues associated with Cicada 3301 are astonishingly difficult. They require basically a high professional level of proficiency in cryptography and steganography. So basically code breaking and familiarity with programming and image file types and encoding and stuff like that. And Cicada 3301 also is sort of surrounded in myths and legends around the internet, mainly focusing on the idea that it is not, in fact, a game, that it's real, that Cicada 3301 has some sort of higher purpose, that it's not just a fiction. You get me?
Interesting, yes.
Right.
Right.
So the first image had a Caesar cipher in it. The first clue was very easy to solve. You just open up the image in Notepad. That gives you the image as binary. And at the very end of it, it had the word Caesar in it. People pretty quickly realized, okay, Caesar cipher. That's
right. That's one of the for people who don't know. That's one of the early cryptographic encoded things, right? One letter means another letter.
That if you're learning cryptography, that's basically the first one they teach you. It's like a very very easy thing to solve, right? So people solved the Caesar cipher pretty much instantly. And then that led to a URL with an image of a wooden duck on it, a decoy, like a hunting decoy, right? And it said, "Looks like you can't guess how to get the message out." So it was sort of playing with the people solving it, that this was a wrong end, this was a decoy. And so people were stuck here for a while until they realized that hidden in the words were the words outguess, right? Looks like you can't guess how to get the message out. So outguess is a kind of obscure piece of software from the 1990s that basically works to hide data inside the JPEG image encoding format. So when you save a JPEG, it's a lossy format. So it'll compress the image and it gets rid of high frequency information within the image. That's why when you download and save JPEGs and just pass them back and forth between your friends or whatever, they start to look pixelated. They start to look all grainy. And so Outguess is a software that I had never heard of at the time, but a lot of people had, I guess, that makes minute changes to the frequency of these tiny little pixels within the image that are completely invisible to the naked eye. But if you then pass that image with the altered data back through Outguess, you can essentially find whatever is hidden inside it. So people download Outguess, they run the image of the duck through it, and then this is where the game basically really starts, right?
Gotcha. So when they ran the duck through, what happened?
So it gave them another image and a message that sort of revealed that this was being run by a group of people called Cicada 3301.
And what's that referencing? Is that referencing something else? The name Cicada? Do you know?
There's a lot of theories about that. People think that it might be related to the Cicada, the insect that they hibernate underground for a series of years, then emerge. They think that there's some sort of symbolism to that. People think that the number 3301, 33 is obviously prominent within occult philosophy. I mean, it's the 33rd degree of Freemasonry. It's the age at which Christ died. It's the number of vertebrae you have in your spine. There's all sorts of esoteric connotations with that, but none of those ever have ended up really playing into the puzzle, and so nobody really knows to this day how that relates or what the name really means.
And how many people do you think were participating in trying to figure out these puzzles that Cicada 3301 was putting out on what is it, 4chan, you said?
Yeah, so it started out on 4chan, and on the first day there were probably only, I don't know, a couple dozen or maybe under 100 people who were sort of interested in this. It seemed to be just another sort of throwaway game for people to play. But as the days progressed, it became clear that this was a very, very serious puzzle, that there were very difficult clues, and there were news stories written about it. I'm not exactly sure where, but it pretty quickly spread off of 4chan. And basically, 4chan was no longer really the hub to be in for solving it. A lot of this moved into private IRC groups and basically groups of people who were dedicated cryptographers or studying cryptography who were sort of able to realize that, whoa, this is serious, and they got really, really into it.
And what happened as far as the puzzles? Do you know how many total puzzles were posted?
Oh, there are dozens
Okay.
and dozens. So this is all happening in 2012. Cicada, they do a thing that's basically a yearly puzzle. So on January 5th of 2012, 2013, and 2014, they would basically run the game for that year, right? So inside, or sorry.
Sorry, so you say that their game resets on January 5th every year? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
they basically intend all the people who win the game to have won it before the next cycle begins the next year.
And are they actually telling people that they've solved it right, or is it all done secretly?
There's a complicated process for that. So Cicada, they work through PGP encryption. So they have always been very, very clear that in order to communicate with them, if it doesn't have their specific public PGP key, it is not them talking to you. But there have been multiple instances in the puzzle where they would encourage people who've essentially reached different points in the game to give them email addresses. So you put in your own email address, and then they'll send you something with their attached PGP key so you know it's them.
Interesting.
And there's a variety of things. There's a wide variety of things that they ask people. But so the first year, 2012, only a very small number of people actually managed to make it to the end of the game. It was incredibly difficult. I dropped out basically almost instantly. I wasn't capable of solving any of these cryptographic puzzles. But so basically this, if you did actually solve the puzzle, you would get a link to an Onion site on the Tor network, right? The Onion router. A lot of people call it the deep web or the dark web.
Dark web, right? Sure.
Yeah. But so this was a private hidden website. You would put your email in, and then they would send you out an email. And the email would ask you basically a variety of philosophical questions. And you would reply to these. The first years were, do all humans have a right to anonymity and privacy? Should information be free? And does censorship harm humanity? Which sounds kind of innocuous. This sounds sort of like a libertarian kind of almost hacktivist type of thing.
Right, like a
Right?
specific part of the internet community, right?
Yeah, I mean, which is exactly the type of people who would be into this, you know. Um, and so you would answer that, and then they'd send you back an email that would allow you to basically be the winner of the game. So only a very set number of people actually completed this, and only one of these people is actually known. Only one of them has come forward publicly to say that he won. His name is Marcus Warner, and there was a very good Rolling Stone article on him, and to this day, he's the only person who's ever acknowledged that he's actually won any of these contests.
Remarkable. And is he from the States? Is he from the U.S.?
Yeah, he's from the U.S. He's basically like a child prodigy. He was 16 when he won it. He was working on it with a group of people from all over the world. There was a guy from Norway and stuff, but he was the only one who ended up cracking the code himself.
Fascinating.
And so Warner says that, and this is all his words, that when he won the game and he answered the questions, they sent him back an email that linked him to another Onion site, another Tor hidden service that was a forum. Okay, and so on the forum there were a set number of people who were all working under pseudonyms. They told him that they were members of Cicada who had already been selected and already proved themselves in some way to be like joined as full members of this group, and that he was now like basically a prospect to join this group. They went on to say that they called themselves a think tank. They compared themselves to a think tank.
Interesting.
Saying that they were developing methods to aid privacy and encryption online. And they tasked Marcus, and he said there were several other people who made it in. They're all unknown to this day. But he said that they were all tasked to work together to develop software tools to aid digital privacy, not piracy, privacy. So Marcus says that he basically came up with an idea to make a piece of software that would aid whistleblowers in basically doing like a sort of dead drop thing or like a dead man switch type of thing, right?
Right.
But he says that communication with the original Cicada members was very poor, and that basically the entire thing just fell apart, that people just sort of stopped coming because there was no communication, nothing was ever actually developed, and nobody ever actually ended up creating anything. Then he says he went back to the Onion forum one day to check in, and it was gone. And he never spoke to anyone from Cicada ever again.
And what year was that?
That was towards the end of the puzzle in 2012.
So it was that fast. So it was just a 1 year blip. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But then in 2013, this is where things get really interesting for me, because this is where there's because the first year the puzzle was pretty innocuous. It just sounds like a libertarian sort of hacker adjacent code breaker freedom of speech type of thing, right?
Right.
The second year it gets tinged with basically serious occultism. So in January 2013, on the 1 year anniversary of the first puzzle, there was a document that was posted on 4chan, basically only a few hours before the new puzzle was posted, right? So this document claims to be, it's posted anonymously, of course, and it does not have Cicada's PGP key, so it's regarded as unofficial or unverifiable.
Right.
But it's a very intricate, basically document that claims to be a leak from a Cicada insider. He says that he's a member of Cicada for over a decade, that English is not his first language, and he gives a pretty dire warning for people to stay away from the Cicada puzzles. He says that Cicada is an organization that basically presents itself as a scientific think tank, but that's a ruse, that in reality they are a left-hand path religious group. And this all sounds sort of fantastical. This sounds very cyberpunk, sort of Hollywood, I guess. But there are certain things in this message that kind of bear weight in my mind.
What are those things?
So he said this guy, he says that he's a military officer. He says that he's approached by his superior. They discuss science, philosophy, politics, and they specifically discuss ideology, right? And so his superior has an abiding interest in Nietzsche, and they talk about the idea of the Übermensch, and he's fascinated with the idea of the Übermensch, right? This idea that there's like a perfect form of man, a Superman who will be above others. The leaker's superior says that Cicada recruits from the military and academia and promising political figures to try to basically form sort of an intelligence group, that it's sort of they work using a sort of initiatory power structure, that this is essentially a secret society that's not directly attached to any nation or any real official group, right? So he expounds on the beliefs of the organization, which have some specific things that jump out at me. He says that they believe in the ideas of Francis Halion, who is a Belgian cyberneticist. He's a philosopher. And he founded a group called the Global Brain Group, I believe in the 1980s. So the Global Brain Group promotes this idea of a global brain or a global mind. This is a pretty common idea that you'll probably run across if you read about sort of occultism or anything like that for a long period of time. The idea essentially being that the earth is essentially a mind, that if you think of every human on the planet as a neuron, then you can think of communication between humans as being analogous to communication between neurons. And this sort of forms a sort of macro mind over the earth, right? And so I looked into this idea pretty deeply, and I figured out that this idea is not new, and it did not originate with Halion. It originated with a French Jesuit named Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who worked with a Russian scientist named Vladimir Vernadsky. And they originally called this concept the noosphere.
Noosphere, right. Was it from the book, The Changing Images of Man? Is that right?
I believe so, yeah. So this is sort of like I mean, I've heard of the noosphere before. It's in video games. It's in the Stalker series. That's a big part of that video game. But basically, it's the same idea, that there's this sort of invisible force or something like that, or a force or an energy, which is created by thoughts, and this sort of surrounds the earth and can influence reality. This is sort of similar to ideas of like Schumann resonance, or basically like the global unconscious, that there's a measurable state essentially to human consciousness, group human consciousness, that can have powerful effects in material reality. Okay, so that originates with this Jesuit, though. Okay, and so then that's a little interesting to me, because the very next point of this ostensible warning says that the Cicada group believes in Jesuitical concepts, such as the ends justifying the means. They're very amoral. And they also believe in total freedom of information. So that sort of makes a lot of sense, because Halion wrote about how as information becomes more free and communication becomes faster between humans, that can sort of be likened to an increase in intelligence in the global brain, right? It's faster in processing power. It's more powerful. It's a more powerful mind. So that links up pretty well with essentially this warning, and that, I mean, this just makes a lot of sense, even though this is sort of a very Hollywood, very sensationalist idea that there's this secret society trying to do something like that. The warning goes on to say that this is essentially like a very religious organization, that they tell their followers this aphorism to find a death every day, which is another sort of Jesuitical concept. I mean, that's one of these sayings like find a death every day, create your own fear. These are like concepts that the Jesuits teach in order to basically exert social control. So that's just very interesting. So basically, the warning goes on to say that as you continue up in this organization, they teach sort of more blatantly religious concepts. They teach that there is no soul apart from the body. They teach that there's no salvation to be found because there's nothing from which to be saved. These are very sort of left-hand path, like sort of almost satanic ideas, right? I mean, if you're working under a Christian mindset. They also specifically teach that there is no objective reality, that perception creates reality. That this is obviously a very, very common feature in all occult writing, chaos magic all the way back. That if you can change your own perception, or maybe more powerfully change group perception, you can directly manifest events into reality. I mean, magic exists as the science of turning will into action. Or I'm not sure if that's the exact quote, but
What's changing conform by the power of the will? What is it? Making change in conformance with the will?
yeah, that's it. So that drops on the 1 year anniversary of Cicada 3031. So people on the forum are reading this, they're freaking out. Some people sort of are drawing connections between this and what's been going on with Cicada. Some people are kind of concerned about this. And then only a few hours after that, it's the start of the next clue. It's the start of the next year's puzzle. And so this sort of, I mean, I think there's kind of two possibilities here. There's the sort of very shocking sort of cinematic idea that this was like a leaker who was trying to preempt the puzzle that year, or it's meant to sort of be flavor for the puzzle, that it's meant to sort of lend sort of like an occultic cast to this year's puzzle to sort of scare people and sort of maybe even drum up more interest because of how sort of frightening those ideas are.
Right. Interesting. So then it went on for a whole nother year, is that correct?
Yes, and specifically this year, the puzzles were a lot different. The first puzzle basically led you to Liber Alvel Legis, Crowley's Book of the Law. It used what's called a book cipher. So you get a long string of random numbers, and then you have to sort them into pairs, the first number being the line in the book, and the second number being the character on the horizontal axis of that line, right? So people had to basically sort through the entirety of Liber Alvel Legis to find characters in order to sort out the next clues, right?
Interesting. So they basically are forcibly studying, making people study the
they're
book of the
making
law.
people study the Book of the Law for a long period of time, like over and over again.
Interesting. So they're definitely directing people's attention and time towards whatever book they're trying to promote at that time.
Yeah, exactly. And so then people eventually solve that puzzle. They get a long string of characters, a lot of new clues, and that leads them to another image that has the Anglo-Saxon runic alphabet in it. And this puzzle is a gematria puzzle, which is a sort of a Kabbalistic concept, where an alphabet is all the letters in an alphabet are assigned numerical values.
Right.
So the puzzles have sort of changed in cast. I mean, you're doing gematria. That's basically high occultism.
Right.
Yeah.
So did it just lead on down that road of leading people through occult training, steps?
Essentially. So basically, there were a lot more puzzles, but when you got to sort of the end of this segment of puzzles, it linked them, because you remember last year, in 2012, there was a set of philosophical questions asking you about freedom of information and stuff like that. So this year there's another set of questions, but these ones are a lot different. These ones are blatantly philosophical and, in my mind, quite occult as well. They ask you to respond to, is there no truth? Does observation change the thing being observed? There's a reference to the Zen koan about there's a famous Zen koan. I think it's maybe the most famous Zen koan about a monk who goes to see the master, and the master asks him who he is, and he says, "Oh, I'm a student." And then the master's like, "No, who are you?" And basically it leads down this whole rabbit hole until the monk just has to say, "Oh, I am." So there's sort of a mystic philosophy in there. But two of these questions really jump out at me. You can find these online. The first one is, there is no truth, and the second is, all things are true. So you have to respond to both of these questions.
Interesting.
And if I don't know if you've read this, those are basically the saying of Hassan-i Sabah, who was the head of the Hashanshins during the Crusades. He was an 11th century Muslim leader. And that's sort of interesting to me because the Hashanshins were basically a mystic sect. They were an initiatory military order that was known for basically two things. They were known for unflinching loyalty, and they were masters of psychological warfare and specifically propaganda. So there's these sort of veiled references to initiatory orders and propaganda.
Interesting. But the actual phrase or the axiom of Hassan-i Sabah is, nothing is true, everything is permitted.
Yeah, correct. And most people might know that from like Assassin's Creed, but that was a very real concept, which I believe Crowley also wrote about. I'm not sure
Yes,
in which of
no, he
his
definitely
books.
referenced it. Yeah.
Yeah, but so that sort of brings to mind propaganda, and then I'm reading these questions, and um, another one of these questions is to explain the difference between a Facebook feed and reality. So you're in this real mindset of nothing being true, everything being permitted, and that perception does create reality, and that it can be done through propaganda. That sort of seems to be the implication here. I mean, I should have mentioned William S. Burroughs and Robert Anton Wilson also used that phrase
Right.
in Naked Lunch and in the Illuminatus trilogy. So just more occult
You can see
connections
that they
there.
reference it in the movie Performance with Donald Cammell and Mick Jagger. They have a sequence of Hassan is Sabah, and that's an initiatory scene or a vignette within that film, which literally the director sat on the knee of Aleister Crowley. So,
Really,
yes,
I haven't seen that film. I'll
yeah,
have to
look
watch it.
at Performance. I actually did a documentary titled "Occult Hollywood Volume 2" where I talk about that film because Campbell himself was an initiate. He integrated all these occult things into it. And Performance itself had some interesting elements because they referenced Borges, right? Not exactly the same name as this,
Oh,
but
the writer Borges of
correct.
El Aleph. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. So you have all these ideas. He was very literary, Campbell was, and
Mhm.
integrated many, many references into his films, which he wrote. Sorry,
Interesting,
so yeah,
interesting.
check it out.
Oh, I will.
Performance was ranked number the best 100 British films of all time, and it's kind of a little bit like Eyes Wide Shut in the sense that it was re-edited. It was met with so much scandal. There was drug taking and nudity that you really don't even know what the real director's intent was because it was recut by the studio over and over again. But you can still see pieces of it, and you can tell it's about identity. It's about who you are. Jagger and the other lead character change visages. It's really a remarkable book. I mean, for somebody who like looks at the occult from the outside, you can tell it's all there.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. But you can see these are sort of recurrent themes that indicate really sort of an authentic understanding of essentially high occultism that's been sort of slowly introduced, but it's definitely there. And now people who are solving these puzzles are essentially familiar with a lot of these concepts, or they maybe already were familiar with a lot of these concepts, and maybe they agree with them. I don't know.
Well, they're definitely being initiated through a step
Yeah.
by step process. You could look at each one of these clues as a step up the initiatory ladder, to so to speak. I mean, whoever's running this kind of alternate reality game is definitely changing people's. They're actually learning about magic while it's happening to them themselves. It seems like.
They definitely are. And so interestingly, nobody who has ever passed this phase ever came forward to say they won. So people think that people eventually sort of won this year of the contest, but nobody is really sure who.
Interesting.
Um, not one person's ever came forward to say that they won it.
Fascinating. Well, Wanner, the guy you mentioned who is from Virginia, says that he has the PGP key and he has money online, online saying, "I can prove that I got something from this key that I won."
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
He
he's,
definitely won in
yeah,
2012.
yeah.
It's indisputable. That he completed the 2012 puzzle.
But it's almost there's like an element to this whole situation that's kind of it reminds me of the Enigma machine where they put out very complex crosswords to try to farm for the smartest people. It reminds
Yeah,
me a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah. That's definitely an element of it.
Yeah.
That this is sort of acting as like a filter to find people who are the most dedicated and the most intelligent, and I mean would ostensibly be the most useful to be to a group like this.
Yeah, like an invisible college or something
Yeah,
like that, something Rosicrucian.
yeah.
Like they have these invisible colleges still today. Even there's an article, I can't remember the title of it, but there's one going on in Silicon Valley amongst all these, tech giants.
Oh, that wouldn't surprise me at
No,
all.
it
I
does
just haven't
exist.
heard
I
of
got to
that.
find the name of it, but I know that some of these big names you hear on the radio, or I mean, on TV and in the media, are involved in the propagation of technology to enrich, human beings and shape them in one direction.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, that freaks me out a little, but it's true.
It's true.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at Shakespeare itself, I don't think that there was a guy by the name of Shakespeare who wrote those. I think it was coming out
Oh
of
no,
Sir
it
Francis
was.
Bacon out of the Invisible College. It was,
I have sort of my own ideas about Shakespeare. I think it was sort of written by committee. I think Francis Bacon and possibly Kit Marlowe were
I agree. I
maybe
agree.
involved. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway,
but yeah.
so getting back to Cicada 3301, what happened next after this second round of games?
So basically, it was all quiet up until January of the next year. So it's January 5th again, third anniversary. Another clue launches. This leads to another Onion site. This leads to an interesting collage of William Blake paintings. So it's the picture of Urizen. You're probably familiar with it. Urizen with his hands spread in the sort of compass square, basically drawing out the universe after he usurps the other Zoa.
Right.
And it's two of those sort of forming like a little hexagram type of thing. And then on either side of that is a hand from his painting of Nebuchadnezzar. So the Nebuchadnezzar has those clawed hands on either side of that. And so there's a bunch of clues and codes hidden in that. And so once people crack through those, they find the first 3 pages of this book called Liber Primus, which is Latin for first book. It's written in runes, and there's another gematria code that you have to use to solve that. That leads to a magic square that you have to solve, which is a very old sort of occult concept. I think it comes from Agrippa, of a square where each column and row add up to the same number. There's like Agrippa's Sun Square and Saturn Square and stuff like that, Mars Square. But in this one, all the columns and rows add up to 1033, so that's 3301 backwards. And when you crack through that, the clues basically no longer even have the pretension of being not occult. They basically just give you these very cryptic messages now about how prime numbers are sacred, and they talk about just occult concepts in there. And essentially, this year's puzzle, 2014, is cut off short. People find the full text of Liber Primus, which is dozens and dozens of pages, all in encoded runes that are all coded and ciphered, each page with a different method. And there are little illustrations in them that sort of resemble maybe the Voynich manuscript, or they strongly resemble the illuminated poems of William Blake, or the pages out of Jung's Red Book. They have this sort of mystic vibe to them. But people struggle to decode these pages for years. The entire text of Liber Primus is not yet decoded. I think people have only decoded maybe 5 or 6 pages of the dozens of pages that have been given so far.
Wow.
So the puzzle basically grinds to a halt. Nobody can solve this. And so the next year rolls around. It's now 2015. And instead of dropping a new clue for a new puzzle for the year, Cicada just says that you get no new clues until you solve Liber Primus. And well, this was in 2015. It's 2019 now. As of right now, no more progress has been made.
That's fascinating. I mean, so that was the end of it. Liber
That
Primus pretty much shut everything down.
it seems like unless somebody can crack through it, it seems like it's just a sticking point. Yeah.
So how does this tie into this young man who is in Brazil?
So now it's March 27th, 2017. So Bruno Borges is a 24-year-old philosophy student in Rio Branco, Brazil. This is over on the west side of the country in kind of a rural area by the border of Peru and Bolivia. Okay. So he's described as highly intelligent, but his family says that he's been acting strangely for months, right, before this happens. He's locked in his room. He refuses to eat. He loses a ton of weight, and he basically looks really bad. And so then on March 27th, he disappears. He just leaves his house, or is taken from his house. No one really knows, and he's just gone. So his parents crack open his room and they find the most stunning scene inside. Every single wall is white and it is covered with densely packed coded language that's of his own, it's his own invention. So it doesn't use any sort of alphabet. They're all these little, just small symbols of his, that he devised himself, ostensibly. And inside the room, there are 14 manuscripts. These big, they look like phone book manuscripts, which contain the same text and diagrams on the walls. On the walls are a lot of sort of like Kabbalistic diagrams, I guess. There's Metatron's cube. You can sort of point out. There's some symbols that look like are of his own invention. There's also a painting of a figure in a white robe with one of the symbols that he invented on its back, and there's a painting of him in a white robe with an alien, sort of like a prototypical, like a gray alien, sort of holding him by the shoulder.
Right, with Saturn in the background, it looks like it's some
Yes.
kind of initiatory sequence or something.
Yes, exactly. And so then, but most striking of all is there's a life-size statue of Giordano Bruno in the middle of the room. This is a big statue. It's like 6.5 feet tall. Um, and so this nobody quite knows what to make of this, and it basically becomes a huge media circus in Brazil. I never heard of this in the States on any of our media.
I did. I mean, it kind of
Did you?
flashed around. Somebody sent it to me, and it might have been posted on social media, but it didn't go on for very long. People were like, "What's this? What's this about?" At least
Yeah, yeah.
in my circle.
But people on X, so the same paranormal board on 4chan, were freaking out about this. This was a subject of discussion for years. I still see it posted sometimes, basically.
Interesting.
Um, but so basically, people in the Brazilian media ostensibly do their best to basically complicate things. They point out that Borges, who's the student who disappeared, is the spitting image of Giordano Bruno. They speculate that maybe he's the philosopher reincarnated. So Giordano Bruno is a very, very interesting guy. He's not a figure that most people are intimately familiar with, though a lot of people who are into esotericism have almost certainly heard of him. He was a 16th century Dominican friar who became deeply involved with Hermetic philosophy, the practice of magic, and occultism. He left Italy and he traveled all around Europe to Switzerland, to France, to England, to Germany, basically traveling between colleges and the courts of royalty, which are all sort of the same thing at the time, ostensibly just convincing people that he could do magic, which worked pretty well. He was a favorite of the French King Henry III, and he eventually ended up going to Oxford in England, and he there was acquainted with and associated with basically the social circle of spies and academics and diplomats who surrounded John Dee, right? So it's not believed that he ever met John Dee, but they were in England at the same time, so I mean it's possible, and they were both deeply involved in this sort of hermetic occult philosophy. So Bruno was also an expert astronomer. He had several positions sort of deemed controversial during the day. He was a heliocentrist. He believed that there could be life on other planets. He proposed that the universe could be infinite. And this is sort of similar to Galileo, who was doing sort of the same work at the same time. A lot of people say that Bruno sort of became a martyr for science. So in 1600, he was tried by the Catholic Church for supporting heretical positions. He ardently believed in reincarnation, and he denied the divinity of Jesus Christ and Mary. He was sort of not really a Christian at all at the end, but he was burned at the stake, and his ashes were thrown in the Tiber. So there's a lot of theories as to why this happened. Some people say that he was a martyr for science. I personally don't think that's true. Neil deGrasse Tyson, I haven't read his book, but apparently in the introduction to one of his books, he lists Giordano Bruno as being one of his sort of idols, I guess.
I see.
who saying that he was killed for practicing astronomy. I don't think that's true at all. I think that he was ostensibly killed for his theological positions on magic and for practicing magic, basically in the open.
I would agree with
Um,
that as well. I mean, he pretty much denied. I think he denied all very standard Catholic ideas, which necessitated his end.
yeah, yeah. He was also apparently very like pugnacious. He apparently got in just literal fistfights with people. That he basically sort of soured a lot of people's opinions on him by being kind of just a jerk. I don't know. So, but anyway, the church got rid of him and they burned him.
So,
So, um, then back to Bruno Borges. So basically, he's still missing. And people notice that in the upper corner of his room, next to all this sort of esoteric script that covers the walls, there's a cicada logo. And people aren't really sure to this day exactly how they're connected or if they are directly connected, if at all. But it's interesting to note that Giordano Bruno, rather, in the 1600s, was born in Naples, Italy, in the town of Nola. Okay, Nola sits between two mountains. It's Mount Vesuvius and Mount Cicala, which is also known as Mount Cicada. And so some people put Bruno's birth inside Cicala Castle, which is also known as Cicada Castle. So it's unknown to this day whether Bruno thought that there was some connection that maybe he discovered, or if maybe he was trying to reach out to the cicada group, or maybe if there was some genuine connection between them.
right, and the
Uh,
symbol of the cicada is like a moth or something like that, right? So it's that exact same symbol was in his room in the middle of the Amazonia.
it's the exact same. It's the exact same image. He might as well have printed it out off his computer.
Right.
It's a very specific PNG or JPEG of the cicada. It's the exact one.
So has
Yeah.
anybody translated or decrypted what he wrote all over his walls?
Yeah, they didn't need to. So basically, the police searched for Bruno Borges all over the place. They couldn't find him, except for they talked to some locals in a very rural area in Brazil who said they saw him go into the jungle. But they searched the jungle, they couldn't find him. Eventually, later the next year, he just came back, and he was interviewed by Brazilian TV, and he comes off to me as basically like mentally ill or like a crazy person. I don't know, but he himself then took the writing that was all over his walls. He translated it himself, and he released it as a book in Brazil, which instantly became a bestseller. Everyone had followed this media circus, and he basically made a ton of money off of it. So a lot of people think it was just a marketing stunt.
Do you know what the
Um,
contents of that work contains, or is it still in Portuguese?
it's only in Portuguese. It has not been translated to English, and I can't find a copy of it here in the U.S. I did talk to a Brazilian guy on Twitter who says that he's read it, and he says that it's basically, in his opinion, nonsense. He says it's essentially like pretentious pseudo philosophy. It's something that I don't know, somebody who thought maybe very highly of their own esoteric knowledge might put down.
Interesting.
So I'm of the opinion that it's probably just a marketing stunt, but there's just some niggling doubts that it seems connected somehow. I don't know.
Well, it's the same kind of thing. It's like mystery. There's cryptograms or cryptography involved. There's a mysterious figure. Where did you get your information? There's esotericism. So it's kind of got. If somebody is interested in those things, you've got all the kind of hot topics for kind of LARP hoax, so to
Yeah,
speak.
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, some people are good. Some people, there's other, satanic crime hoaxes that are out there because the people know the information that people are interested in. So, of course, if you master that information, you can LARP it, you can hoax it. Whether
Yeah,
you're into
exactly.
conspiracies,
Sometimes the
philosophy.
LARP suddenly turns into a little bit more than a LARP.
Right. Well, that's true as well. I mean, wouldn't you say something like this is a little bit more than a LARP? If that guy, if people.
I mean, he triggered a massive police search, and he was being looked for months in Brazil. I mean, it was a real event.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
interesting. So is there anything else? We're at about 50 minutes. Is there anything else I missed or anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
No, I don't think so. Just thanks for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. And again, your Twitter feed is Saturnalia Sundown. So two different words, Saturnalia Sundown. And there's also some really, I mean, just great posts. I really was just looking through your whole feed about occultism and music and insights into what goes down in New Orleans. Of particular interest was a picture of, one of these groups doing a parade, and it says, I mean, it has the Mystic Crew with a K, spelled with a K, but I think one of these was like, somebody do what thou wilt or something. Oh, Crew what thou wilt was the insignia with the seal
Yeah,
of Babylon.
that's actually the local chapter of the OTO
Oh, okay.
participates in the Mardi Gras parade. So you can see they have like the insignia of Babylon on
Yep,
there and
makes
stuff.
perfect sense. The Hydra, everything else. So anyway, I highly recommend people check out his tweets and follow him on Twitter. So again, Sundown, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, cool. All right, let me stop this.